สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ
Welcome to NBT World's Fireside. I'm Benjamin Ruchopagan.
And I'm Warisa Nidanat Gomon. Every week we have a fireside chat exploring what's going on in Thailand, diving deep into our latest obsessions.
So previously, we did an episode about Thailand's decision to bring esports into schools nationwide. And one of the things we kept coming back to was how dramatic the policy reversal really was. So today, the government is promoting esports as a pathway to digital skills. It's supporting game developers through various incentive programs and positioning gaming as part of Thailand's creative economy. Now, major international gaming events are coming to Bangkok, and policymakers regularly are talking about the industry's economic potential. But it wasn't always the case, because for much of the 2000s, video games were viewed primarily as a social problem. Policymakers worried about addiction, news reports were linking gaming to violence, the government introduced restrictions aimed at limiting young people's access to video games. So how do we get from there to here?
Well, the answer isn't quite straightforward, and it definitely was not a single policy announcement or like a sudden change of heart either. It was a gradual transformation that unfolded over more than 2 decades. And as Thailand's internet infrastructure improved, gaming communities expanded, competitive gaming became more organized, and local game developers began finding success. That is when public perceptions slowly started to change. And today, we're looking at the timeline behind one of the most significant reversals in modern Thai culture and economic policy. How did Thailand go from restricting games to promoting them? And how did gaming become part of the country's broader strategy for developing digital talent and creative industries? And to answer those questions, we have to go way back until the beginning. This is Thailand's total pivot on video games.
So to understand how dramatic Thailand's policy reversal was, we have to first understand how gaming was viewed in the early 2000s. Now, over 20 years ago, I can't believe it's been that many years already, but online gaming was relatively new because the technology had just caught up to what could become, present in everybody's home. It was the era of dial-up internet. It was the era of, buying SIM cards for 30-day access and things like that. So it had only just become mainstream. So for the very first time, parents, educators, governments around the world were trying to make sense of their children suddenly spending hours on the computer and often interacting with strangers online. Stranger danger was a huge thing back in the day. Now in Thailand, those concerns have quickly evolved into a broader fear that gaming was becoming a social threat.
Right. And if we could take a time machine and go back for 20 years or so, there's one game in particular that really sticks out and has become the face of anxiety, and that's Ragnarok. And for those of you who don't know Ragnarok online, it launched in Thailand in late 2002, and it's a Korean online role-playing game, and it exploded in popularity almost immediately. Within months, hundreds of thousands of Thai players were spending their free time exploring its fantasy world, completing quests, and socializing online. And I think the socializing aspect is what got parents a little bit paranoid, because who are you talking to? You've never even seen their faces before, right? And too many young people, it was just a new hobby to them. And to many adults, it kind of looked like an addiction as well. Like, what are you doing online all day?
Now that you say there was the socializing aspect of it, we have to remember 2003, this is 5 years before Facebook even comes out. So it's 5 years before social media. So it really was some of the only, social forums, online, which also has a gaming component. So that's highly addictive in 2 different dimensions, right? So by 2003, concerns about excessive gaming had become so widespread that Thailand's then Ministry of Information and Communication Technology introduced one of the most aggressive anti-gaming measures in the country's history. Online game servers would be shut off between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., and internet cafes were expected to follow suit and follow similar operating restrictions, with mandatory breaks introduced to prevent players from gaming for hours without interruption, which, we can see is pretty unhealthy either way, right? So there was a temporary ban to combat what officials described as online gaming addiction among the nation's youth, a curfew, if you will. In retrospect, it's really difficult to imagine such a measure today, but at the same time, Thailand has implemented similar restrictions, especially around alcohol sales, because alcohol can only be sold from certain hours as well.
And you know what the funny thing is? That even though there were restrictions, it didn't really do much to stop the growing of the game industry. And once the ban ended, player numbers skyrocketed. So it like too much restriction and then boom. Now, according to a 2006 SEC filing by Gravity Company Limited, the developer of Ragnarok Online, its revenue from the Thai market grew 140% from 2003 to 2005. So that's roughly $2.99 million to $7.27 million.
Which is an incredible amount. I mean, it really goes to show that when you repress certain cultures, I mean, especially because it was temporary, you know, the rebound effect was crazy, right? So if Ragnarok curfew represented Thailand's fears about gaming addiction, we have this next major controversy around the same period, which would center on fears of what I would call moral bankruptcy. In 2008, news headlines were dominated by a shocking case involving an 18-year-old student who was accused of murdering a Bangkok taxi driver. Now, according to police reports at the time, the teenager had claimed to be influenced by Grand Theft Auto, which is a major gaming franchise. It's a globally popular game known for its criminal open world gameplay. You know, you can do anything in Grand Theft Auto. That was the whole point. But that incident sparked immediate public outrage.
That's right. And authorities were not slow. They moved in very quickly, and Grand Theft Auto was effectively banned from sales in the whole entire of Thailand. And distributors had to withdraw the franchise from stores, and officials had to warn that retailers could face criminal penalties for continuing to sell the game if they do. Now, more importantly, the case reinforced a powerful narrative that was already common in the media, that violent games could directly influence real-world behavior. And this was Thailand's Columbine moment. Whether that connection actually existed and was kind of beside the point, and public opinion had largely been shaped by the belief that games were capable of causing serious social harm.
I mean, in my opinion, I think that kids can be very impressionable, but I think that violent people are attracted to violent games. You know, I think it's a real chicken or the egg thing. Like, do violent games make people more violent? I'm not sure that it's such a one-to-one relationship like that. I think it's more complex than that.
Right.
So I think that now with 20 years of history, you know, behind us of video games, I don't think that the relationship is as clear-cut as people were making it. So that same year, of course, policymakers took another major step. The Film and Video Act of 2008 introduced a formal regulatory framework for both film and video content. So video games were legally classified as a type of video, bringing them under the same regulatory umbrella. Now, the grounds for banning include undermining or insulting Thailand's institutions, disrupting public order or good morals of the people, or impacting national security. It also stipulated a rating system. We have educational, general, 15 and above, 18 and above, 20 and above, 30 and above, and banned nationwide. It's so interesting that there were so many different age categories, and I really honestly cannot imagine any kind of content that a 25-year-old cannot see, but a 35-year-old can. You know, I think if you're 25-year-old, your frontal cortex is developed, and you know, I don't know if you would have the best judgment at 25 versus 35, but I don't know that a piece of content is going to undermine a 25-year-old more so than a 35-year-old, right? So these measures revealed how the state viewed gaming during this period. Gaming was treated primarily as something that needed supervision, regulation, and occasionally restriction.
But while policymakers were focused on the dangers, something else was happening beneath the surface. Gaming communities were growing, internet cafes were becoming social hubs, competitive tournaments were beginning to attract serious attention, and a generation of Thai nerds, geeks, and even dweebs were starting to identify themselves as gamers.
Thanks, Natty. That growing community would become impossible to ignore because regardless of what Thai society at large thought about gaming as a hobby or gamers as people, no one could put this genie back in the bottle, you know. The years between the late 2000s and the mid 2010s were really formative for the Thai gaming community that was developing as a whole subculture, an entertainment industry, in fact, and eventually even a competitive sport. One of the earlier signs that this transformation arrived was in 2007, actually, and that was the year when we saw the very first Thailand Game Show, or TGS, at the Queen Sirikit National Convention Center.
Right, and the inaugural show featured game launches, cosplay activities, gaming demonstrations, celebrity appearances, and thousands of fans gathering in one place to celebrate a hobby that was often misunderstood outside the gaming circles. Now, for the first time, gaming wasn't hidden away in bedrooms or internet cafes, but it was out in the open and people actually showed up for it. And Thailand Game Show would go on to become the country's largest gaming exhibition and continues to do so even to today. But even its very first edition demonstrated something very important, that gaming had become a mass market cultural phenomenon.
That's right. As gaming culture became more visible, competitive gaming was also becoming more sophisticated. By the early 2010s, MOBAs, which are multiplayer online battle arena games, had taken over internet cafes across Thailand. Students and young adults would gather in teams, occupying entire rows of computers as they coordinate strategies, shouted call-outs, and competed against rival groups. While much of the Western gaming world was focused on League of Legends and Dota 2, many Southeast Asian gamers had become obsessed with Heroes of New Earth, better known as HON or Han. So the game developed an especially passionate following in Thailand, this Heroes of New Earth.
Right. And by 2012, competitive Han tournaments were filling venues, attracting sponsorships even, and awarding meaningful prize pools. Championship matches were being screened at IMAX theaters, which are these huge, like 360 sometimes, screens. Also, professional teams were building fan bases, and esports athletes were becoming recognizable figures within the gaming community. And that same year, Thailand's top Han teams earned opportunities to compete internationally.
Now, there's one Thai team called Mai Awarai Lui, better known as MRR, which qualified for the Han tournament at DreamHack Winter in Sweden, one of the most prestigious esports events in the world at that time. Now, fans back home followed the tournament through live broadcasts, watching international competitions unfold in real time, and cheered on a Thai representative on the global stage. Now, eventually, their successor team, Neolution MRR, would go on to win DreamHack Summer 2015. So long before esports had received any official recognition from authorities, the Thai players were already competing internationally and building their reputations abroad. And Thai players were accumulating years of competitive success, but back then in 2012, there was little or still no official national body representing the country in international esports governance. And as esports expanded globally, the International Esports Federation encouraged participating countries to establish formal or national associations. Now, eventually, the following year in 2013, a group of esport advocates and industry professionals successfully registered the Thai Esports Association, or TESA, in Bangkok. And this became Thailand's first formal esports organization. The goal was to create an official structure capable of representing Thailand internationally, coordinating domestic development, and providing a foundation for future growth. So this effort did not begin with
the government policy, it emerged from the gaming community itself.
I think it was very organic, right? Because at the same time, another side of Thailand's gaming ecosystem was also beginning to mature, because for years, Thailand has really been a consumer of games more than a producer. But gradually, local developers began demonstrating that Thai studios could also successfully create their own original IPs. One of the clearest examples arrived in 2017 with the release of Home Sweet Home. I can't believe it's been so long since the original Home Sweet Home came out. Now, this was a game developed by Bangkok-based Yggdrasil Group. The horror game drew heavily from Thai folklore, superstition, religious imagery as well, and local cultural references. And rather than imitating Western horror, it leaned uniquely into Thai themes. The result was a commercial success that found audiences both inside and outside of Thailand, and does very well on Steam. So more importantly, it demonstrated that Thai stories could really travel in a different medium. I mean, we already know that Thai horror does fairly well as films and TV shows, for instance, and we have a very unique culture around, a unique folklore around horror and, ghosts. So I think that this whole, culture became a unique IP that could translate into many different kinds of, I don't want to be cynical about it, but products, commercial products that can support Thai soft power.
That's true. And the game's popularity eventually caught the eye of the Tourism Authority of Thailand, or the TAT. So the TAT partnered with the franchise to showcase real-world Thai destinations and cultural sites through its online multiplayer edition, Home Sweet Home Online. Now, this includes Pimai Historical Park and Pat Mueang Pi Forest Park, which you can still see today. So gaming had become something that the Thai government could leverage to promote tourism and also soft power. And by the mid-2010s, the picture looked very different from the one policymakers had worried about in the early 2000s. It was producing major public events, international competitors, professional organizations, successful businesses, and globally recognized creative works.
That's right. So once policymakers were starting to see the economic potential of Thai gaming, they began to revisit the industry's regulatory environment in Thailand. How are they controlling it? How are they supporting it, perhaps? So instead of asking how they could control it, they started to ask how it could be developed further. So by the late 2010s, gaming had become too large, too visible, and too economically significant to be treated as merely a social concern. And this was also the period of time when the government was starting to promote the broader Thailand 4.0 vision, which is an economic strategy focused on innovation, technology, and high-value industries. Through this new policy framework, gaming started to look very different to policymakers.
And in 2017, the Sports Authority of Thailand finally recognized esports as an athletic discipline that is eligible for the establishment and registration of a national sports association. Now, this may sound like a bureaucratic change, but it represented a major shift in thinking. For years, esports had occupied an awkward position. Professional players competed internationally, won tournaments, and represented Thailand abroad, but operated without any formal recognition from the nation's sports authority. Shortly afterwards, the Thai Esports Association adopted a new name, the Thailand Esports Federation, or TESF. This move reflected the growing institutional recognition of esports within Thailand.
Now, almost the same time, the economic case for gaming was becoming really difficult to ignore, I would say. The government's DIPA, or Digital Economy Promotion Agency, put out a report showing that by 2019, Thailand's gaming market had reached an estimated value of 22 billion baht. The sector was growing at approximately 13% year on year. That's a fantastic growth rate, by the way, making Thailand one of the fastest growing gaming markets in Southeast Asia. So gaming was becoming mainstream entertainment, reaching millions of people across mobile devices, PCs, and consoles as well, although majority mobile. We're big in mobile gaming.
Right. And if that wasn't enough, a global catastrophe in 2020, which we all remember, would become an unlikely opportunity for digital content industries. When the pandemic pandemic lockdowns disrupted daily life around the world, people spent more time online than ever before, naturally. And globally, mobile game downloads surged while gaming revenues reached record highs. And of course, Thailand was no different. At a moment when major sectors such as tourism and hospitality were facing severe challenges, gaming appeared remarkably resilient. For policymakers searching for new engines of economic growth, the industry suddenly looked even more attractive.
And barely a year later, in 2021, Thailand signals even more institutional recognition for gaming. An official declaration is published in the Royal Gazette designating esports as Thailand's 14th professionally recognized sport. Professional players, coaches, clubs, and organizations, they could now all access many of the same forms of institutional support that were available to traditional physical sports.
But there is a catch, though. As officials examined the sector more closely, they discovered that Thailand faced a significant talent shortage. Now, according to the DIPA report, the country showed a critical lack of specialized game producers, programmers, and developers to fully support industry growth. Now, the problem wasn't a shortage of people working in information technology, but that very few possessed the specific skills or combination of skills required by the gaming industry. Now, universities were producing ICT graduates, but not enough graduates with game development expertise. Thailand had a growing market, but also an undeveloped pipeline of talent.
So the government started to seriously invest, not just in gaming, by the way, but in the digital economy as a whole. Various support measures were introduced, and these included funding programs for digital startups, skills development initiatives, networking opportunities, infrastructure support, tax incentives for gaming-related businesses, and exemptions on import duties for things that are used for research and development. And it took almost 20 years, but the gaming had gone from being associated with curfews, restrictions, and moral panic to receiving formal recognition and investment support from the state. So the next logical step was to move beyond supporting players and to start building a complete ecosystem. By 2024, Thailand's gaming sector had grown into one of Southeast Asia's most prominent markets. The industry was valued at over $1.5 billion, supported by over 32 million active gamers across all the platforms, mobile, PC, and console. Now, projections suggest that this figure could more than double to 3.1 billion by 2033. But being a large consumer market just isn't enough, because gaming is more than just the playing of games. The bigger opportunity was creating those games, exporting those IPs, and developing talent. Now, keep in mind, only a handful of people can become esports athletes and compete internationally for prize pools, but the whole gaming industry more broadly could employ thousands in Thailand.
Right. And one sign of this transition from consumer to creator was the emergence of dedicated development communities. Now, at the start of 2025, we saw the establishment of Bangkok's Game Dev Hub, which is a co-working space for independent developers, programmers, artists, and entrepreneurs. Game Dev Hub hosts workshops, technical training sessions, networking events, and investor pitch opportunities, helping connect creators with the resources needed to turn ideas into commercial products.
Now, later that same year, the cabinet approved a draft Film Act, which was intended to replace the 2008 one, the Film and Video Act of 2008. So the proposed legislation would move away from the older regulatory model by introducing greater industry self-regulation, encouraging the stakeholders to rate the films themselves and decide what is morally appropriate, simplifying the administrative requirements, and establishing new industry bodies to support that growth.
Same time, policymakers introduced a dedicated Draft Game Act, treating games as a distinct industry with its own needs and challenges. But it's not just all gas, no brakes, right? In addition to IP protections, the bill also calls for regulating gambling-like mechanics within games, reflecting ongoing debates about loot boxes, gacha systems, and consumer protection.
I think it's actually very forward-thinking of them, because I think gacha systems can be very addictive, and it can really prime a young generation, for gambling-like tendencies. You know, they get that dopamine hit from winning once every 10th gotcha draw. And that can really set them up for the kinds of behavior that will, it basically sets them up for failure later on in life. Gambling addiction is a real thing. So I do think that that is something that's worth regulating in the gaming industry, right? So last year, you know, that was a bit of a sour note, but on a highlight, last year was also when Gamescom Asia moved to Bangkok. Now, by combining with the long-running Thailand game show, the move creates the largest gaming event Southeast Asia has ever seen, acting as the premier business to consumer or B2B2C platform in the region. It was relocating actually from Singapore to Bangkok. And that's a huge move because Singapore, it was already quite successful. But at this point in time, there was a 6-fold increase in Thai developed games on Steam, jumping from 26 in 2019 to 158 in 2024. This makes Thailand the second largest game exporter in Southeast Asia. So hosting the event here in Bangkok brought global investors and publishers directly to meet Thai indie studios, unlocking international funding and securing gaming as a core pillar of the state's soft power economy.
Right. And at the same time, Thai studios were becoming increasingly integrated into global production networks. The award-winning indie darling Dispatch was developed through a collaboration between Los Angeles-based Ad Hoc Studios and Bangkok-based Igloo Studio, which supported concept art and asset creation. Projects like Dispatch show how Thai studios are increasingly trusted to collaborate on high-profile international productions.
So if this next move doesn't symbolize the complete 180-degree policy pivot, I really don't know what does, because the Ministry of Education, like we talked about in a previous episode, began integrating esports into the To Be Number One program, one of Thailand's most prominent youth development and anti-drug initiatives. Buff to Build Number One is an esports program created as an equitable program where kids, no matter their background, can develop their tech literacy, analytical thinking, teamwork, and emotional management. So the Thai government used to treat games like a kind of youth addiction, and now it's part of an anti-drug program. So gaming went from being an academic distraction to part of the curriculum.
And now we turn it over to our audience. Do you think that gaming needs more regulation or less regulation?
Let us know in the comment section of NBT World's online channels. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Spotify.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ